back. James Harden right on target. Bang, bang, George Niang to Paul Reed from Tyrese Maxey.
Joel
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Pick Swap Podcast. It is an Eagles Monday Night Football. You know, the city gets pretty crazy out here. I won't lie. I left work today, man. It was crazy. I left at 4:30, and it was wild out there. So the city's buzzing. The sports are going crazy right now. We're on the end of the Philly season. I'm here with Sean Bernard. We are going to talk a lot about little things today. We're going to go talk over Doc Rivers, whatever that was, and talk about some other stuff as well. Sean, how you feeling today, man? There's a lot going on.
Yeah, there is. It feels like there is like a different energy when it's Eagles time. Like it kind of throws off the schedule not having it on Sunday, but it does feel like there's like a genuine excitement tonight, that's cool. That's something to look forward to. So we'll be jumping on that after this, but for now we'll talk some Sixers.
Absolutely, and there's a lot here to cover. The Pick Swap Media Group is going crazy right now. We're in full force. Shout out to everyone that's working hard right now. A lot of Eagles coverage coming up. So get that elsewhere. We'll talk about the Sixers today. So we're going to kind of go into this Doc Rivers situation that's happened. We're not going to talk too much about it, but you just want to kind of briefly go over what happened there, Sean?
Yeah, I don't even know if we necessarily need to if we have to. I think we can just make a quick note that everybody should be aware that Twitter likes are public. Everyone can see them. That's always been the case. And sometimes people forget. Doc Rivers may or may not have been one of those people. Pretty firm statement from the Sixers saying that he had been hacked and, just peskily liked a couple inappropriate tweets. But I don't know if you have anything more on that.
I think we're safe to kind of just recognize it, acknowledge that happened, and then just kind of move on because it's, not our business, I guess. Just want to leave it at that.
I do hope that he is at least asked to comment about it at the media day, and there's no chance he finds any humor in it whatsoever. Like, there's some people that like kind of stuff like this, a hacking or whatever, a slip up, whatever actually happened, that'll happen, and they're able to laugh it off. I don't think Doc Rivers is one of those people, so I hope there's a question, but I do not expect a good reaction if there is one.
No, he's not one to really mess with. It seems like most of the time you'll get him at certain times. But this is kind of a different situation. So, I wouldn't ask the question. I'm not there, though. So, I wouldn't ask you. But
would you ask Pop that question?
No, I wouldn't.
Definitely not.
Yeah. But we can move on from that. And we got, a good conversation to have later on today. And Sean and I are going to go through a lot of the bench pieces that have come in. And one specifically we're going to talk about beforehand is Montrezl Harrell, who there was some video footage that during the police stoppage that he was in surfaced, and there were some interesting comments that he made during that. He was redeemable within all of that. He seemed like, a genuine guy throughout those conversations, which is what I kind of took from it. It's just like he seems like just a very real person. So, which is an interesting situation to get that from. But it is what it is, and he made some interesting comments. And you want to talk about what he, mentioned in that footage?
Yeah, so I said this to you right before we hopped on to actually record, but I've never had the experience of like liking a person more after some body cam footage of them legal troubles surfaces. But that's how I feel about Montrezl Harrell. I thought it was as much as like you never want to see that situation, something that probably shouldn't have happened whatsoever. But like I thought he handled himself very respectfully, very responsibly, which especially with like an athlete and a person who like is kind of status in the situation. Like, I'm glad he didn't really flex that. They had a real cool conversation just about the NBA, him and the police officers asking about LaMelo Ball, a bunch of the Hornets players in general. And then some of the more interesting sound bites of it. He was asked who the best center in the NBA is and did reply Nikola Jokic. Any thoughts on that, James?
What can you say? Nikola Jokic did dice him up, we talked about that playoff series pretty in-depthly last week. So, maybe he's recalling on that, not to mention him and Joel Embiid did have whatever that you want to call it, not really a scuffle. Harrell got pissed and, whatever it was. So maybe Harrell's a little bit biased in that sense. This was well before he signed with the Sixers, but, like I said, he seemed like a real guy. He gave real genuine answers. I think it's fair to think Jokic is the best in the league right now, and that's just how Montrez felt, I guess.
Yeah, and especially for him, like a guy who defense is his weak point. Jokic is a slippery guy to guard offensively. Like he's obviously
Yeah.
so talented. Trez is a guy who I'm sure thinks like he can score on just about anyone. So I like he's gonna score on Jokic. Embiid's gonna be like that's kind of where the debate is. But I also
Yeah.
think, like you brought up, he's gonna always remember being shredded apart by Jokic on the biggest
Yeah.
stage because unfortunately that's one of like the biggest bullet points on his career at this point. So I don't think that's forgotten by him. I definitely think that's reason to crown him that title. And that series, I'm sure, is something he won't forget. And just like how the matchups work, comparing those two, like Embiid's a guy who he obviously has developed into a more of a perimeter player than I would say I ever thought would be the case. I think most people is that,
Mhm.
but like he's still a post guy that like that's where Montrez can kind of hold up is he's like he'll bang with you. He's a physical guy. He's strong. So I do think Jokic is a more difficult matchup for him. And who knows, his opinion might shift over the course of this season. And
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe after 6 months with Embiid in practice every day, he'll have a different stance on it
yeah,
next summer.
yeah, definitely. And the other real notable soundbite was he was asked what was the best place to play, best city to play, and he couldn't really come up with an answer. He gave some cool, just kind of talking about like how Memphis was redone, a couple other places, and then he was asked where his least favorite place to play was, and he said the place that I hate hating the most or playing at the most. Thought about it, and he answered with either Philly or Boston. And now he did quickly bring up it was not because of the fans, it's because of the ice underneath the court, which is something that's been a valid complaint for a long time. But any thoughts on Philly being the worst just shortly before he signs here?
No, I mean it. Like you said, it was about the stadium itself, and you know, I can say as somebody that work is there every day, it's cold in that building. It is very, very cold in that building. Even you know, up 2 levels up, it's still cold in that building. So there's reason for it, I guess. I hope he gets accustomed to it this season though, and it doesn't affect him much.
Yeah, no, that's a genuine complaint. That's something that's been brought up for a long time. I think definitely one of the motivations for the Sixers looking for a new stadium, along with obviously the money and all the perks that come with that. And that's something like
Yeah.
I spoke about. So I do respect that. Like he kind of covered up that it wasn't about the fans, even though he had no idea that like this was going to become public ever. But I thought he handled himself well. Overall, stamp of approval for Montrez for kind of that whole interaction. Now, since we're kind of through the gossip portion of this, we can move on to a little basketball. We are going to be talking about more Montrezl Harrell and kind of where he stacks up amongst the bench players that the Sixers have. Now, here's my take that kind of brought me to this is I think Montrezl Harrell and Anthony Melton are the two best bench players that the Sixers have had in decades. I think this is like by far the best bench production that they've had, significantly better than anything that they've had in the Embiid era, and I think dating back to before that. Would you agree with that take?
Yes, definitely in the Embiid era. And then I mean, even before then, when you're talking about the pretty brutal years, and then even into like where the late Iguodala years and stuff. Thinking about those benches, it's hard to even pick guys out that stood out on any of those benches. And then the teams that were, when we were younger, the process years, like those were bench teams. So like the teams that were the guys
Yeah.
starting were bench players. The bench players, were fringe NBA players. So yeah, definitely. As long as I can remember, like enjoying a team, it's definitely the best bench that they have. I do want to ask you because I know we're going to go into this stuff right now.
Mhm.
Um, and we didn't talk about it much beforehand, and I wish we did. But Jae Crowder. So we're
Oh,
hearing a lot of noise about Jae Crowder today. You know, it's seeming like he's available, right? Brian Windhorst is saying that
yeah.
he has a market right now and he's available. Would you want the Sixers to look at a trade here? I know we've talked about the 2-for-1 trades and the things that might need to happen before they settle into the season with 17 guys rostered. Can they do it? Would you want them to do it?
Yeah, absolutely and absolutely. I would empty the clip for Jae Crowder. Jae Crowder is one of my favorite just like connective pieces in the NBA. He's one of those guys that like does his job. He's very PJ Tucker like. I personally even like him a little bit more than PJ Tucker, which I think PJ is probably the better player, but I'm just very much a fan of Crowder and what he does. He's another dog. He's the missing dog on this team is what I tweeted, and if we can add him to that rotation, I mean, the Sixers are the toughest team in the league if that's the case. If we are now rolling out. If we can roll out a
Yeah.
lineup of like Joel Embiid, PJ Tucker, Jae Crowder, like all these guys just have like exactly what we're looking for. He completely fits the bill for me. I think something along the lines of, I mean, we've been looking for a consolation trade for so long. This is like an empty. Give him Furkan, Matisse, Jaden Springer, Isaiah Joe, whatever it takes. If that's what it takes to get it done, I think the Suns are probably going to be in search of a pick. I'm also confused why they're kind of set on getting rid of him. I mean, like there's a guy to move on to, I feel like he's a solid like piece to have in a contending team, and he's ridiculous playoff experience. Has been on contender pretty much everywhere he went. So that's pretty much my thoughts on it. I would love it.
Yes, and yes. Like I agree with everything. And I thought about it today, and I was looking and reading about it, and I was like, it feels like a no-brainer almost at this point. You are in a situation where you need to get rid of some guys. There's tough decisions to be made, but there's guys that are available. Jae Crowder is exactly like he fits the bill. He's the mold, and you turn into a team that is not only just deep, but deep with guys that are versatile, play a lot of positions, are defensive minded, and are leaders and veterans. Like think of all the guys that Jae Crowder has played with. You're talking about CP3 recently, D-Book recently. You're talking about LeBron James at some point in his career. He's talking about like Tatum and all those guys in Boston. Like he's been everywhere that's been successful. He brings that type of energy here. You're talking about PJ Tucker, like all these guys. It's like think about the drastic difference. Just like the way the locker room is, the type of guys that are in the locker room with leaders and veterans compared to the last season and the year before, where like you couldn't even put together, 3 guys that had that experience, and now you just brought in 5 of them. So, like, that's the type of energy they should be going for. That's the type of, like, player and idea and ideology and, the way that they're gonna play, I think is a perfect addition. So, what would it take, do you think?
I think realistically, they have to have some sort of interest in Matisse for it to work.
Yeah.
I'm gonna look up his salary as we're talking, but like it's kind of it's going to be another one of those constellation. Like I think it kind of lines up because that's what they need. But if you throw together like a Furkan, Matisse, I think Isaiah Joe, maybe Jaden. I think probably Jaden Springer. Who do you think has more value? Probably Springer, right?
Probably Springer, I guess. Like I feel like Isaiah Joe around the league, like people don't really know. Whereas like Springer was at least a prospect in a lot of their books.
Right. Yeah, and he was still first round pick, even though he hasn't shown much. Looking at Crowder's cap hit, he's due for 10.1 this year. So that means Matisse and Furkan get you about 9. So you throw in one of these guys and you're pretty much there. I'd be willing to part with a draft pick for Jae Crowder too, even if it is. I mean, the 2029 is the only first that they can trade. That's a lot for Jae Crowder, but I mean, at this point, like if we're going all in with the dogs, you might as well roll with one more.
Yeah, that's true. I could see them. I mean, I could see them right there too. Also being like that is a lot for Jae Crowder. Which, like, thinking about it, it is. Is it just one more year on his contract?
Yeah, he'll be a free agent at the end of this year, so it does make it hard.
Yeah, that makes it tough on an expiring deal. But you got to make the money work. So you just wonder how you're able to do that. But I don't know, man. I don't know. I think he would be a welcomed addition to this team, and like Joel said, you gotta go get guys like PJ Tucker, and then he didn't just get PJ Tucker; he got Harrell, and now could potentially get Crowder as well. It would make a lot of sense, and it was exactly what Joel Embiid wants. So you make that happen. You kill 2 birds with one stone. Everyone's happy. I don't know. He didn't shoot that well last year though. And then where does that put George Niang? Like, do you include Niang in that deal because his spot's now taken up? You have 4 power forwards.
Yeah, that does make it hard, but at the same time, like, I mean, basketball is becoming increasingly less positionless. I think, like, for the role, like, Niang's a power forward, sure, but essentially his role is to come in and shoot threes. Like, you could label him a 2-guard if you really, like, want to put it like that, and the defensive matchups obviously change things, but, like, that's kind of the guy, the type of guys we're looking for, and Crowder's very good at that. Is a sit in the corner on offense kind of guy, not afraid to chuck it. He's a guy that will go 0 for 7 and still be ready to rip it when he catches it, which is something that I've always liked about him for a guy in that role. And yeah, he's another dog. So I'd be in on if this happened. He's a guy that I've talked about kind of this whole offseason, and I do hope that's the case. If there's something, I'm sure there'll be more details that come out. I am still confused. He's coming off not great year, but I don't think the Suns should be any rush to get rid of him.
Yeah, and it doesn't make sense because, like, what is their timeline then?
Yeah.
Like, if they want to get younger where Jae Crowder is, like, what is their expectation for this year? Like, you went all in when you get Chris Paul. You should be playing for a championship. Like, why would you want to get a first-round pick?
I think it's a little bit of I don't think they think Crowder is, like, that caliber of complimentary piece.
Yeah.
But I also think it's one of those, like, the grass isn't always greener situations. Like, sure, he may not be excellent. Like, he's not a guaranteed starter. I believe he started most of the games last year for him, but like you could do far worse than having a Jae Crowder in your starting lineup. So I don't know. I'm sure we'll hear more on it in coming days. He would be a terrific addition to the bench unit. To get back to the bench unit the Sixers currently have, and so you want to just go one by one through these past couple of years. I figure we'll start it last year. I kind of did my own take on who I thought was the most impressive bench player. Some of it wasn't always statistical, but we're just going to go down the line and see if Montrezl Harrell and D'Anthony Melton are better than these players. So to start with last year, I put the most impressive bench player as Georges Niang, who averaged 9.2 points, 2.7 rebounds, 1.3 assists, shot 40.3% from three on 5.1 attempts per game. Do you think Montrezl Harrell and D'Anthony Melton are better than Georges Niang?
Yes, I do think Montrezl Harrell and D'Anthony Melton are both better than Georges Niang. And I don't, think it's all particularly very close. I like George a lot. Don't get me wrong. George is one of my, as a fan, like a personal favorite. I love him. I love what he brings. And I also think like in all of this, he's kind of lost in the shuffle.
Sure.
And I would like him to, this year he struggled a bit in the playoffs, right? Like a little bit at times. And
Definitely.
there were times where he was like real cold. And that sucked. And then defensively, he's just not really there. But during the regular season, George was fantastic. And he's a guy that's going to be important for them. But yeah, Montrez and Melton are both better than Niang. They are more versatile and can bring more to the team. So yes.
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. I don't think it's particularly close. I love Georges too, but I think both these guys are significantly more well-rounded. And Niang is falling into the category of a guy who, unfortunately, like when he's hitting threes, he rocks. If he's not, he's kind of unplayable, especially with the defense. So I think these guys just have a little more overall to their games and can still shoot threes. Melton more than Harrell. Obviously, Harrell can't really, but I think they just bring more to the table. To move back to last year, I'm giving Shake Milton the nod, who averaged 13 points a game, 2.3 rebounds, 3.1 assists, shot 35% from three on 3.2 attempts, played 23.2 minutes. This made me happy for Shake, but also very disappointed just how significant the regression was.
Yeah, dude, he looks swole though. You saw that picture? He looks big.
Shake, yeah.
Dude, I love Shake. I wish he was better than he is. And it just feels like that he should be and that he could be.
Yeah.
It always feels he leaves a lot to be desired. But yeah, Melton I think is like Shake Milton. I think you said this when we first traded for him, when the Sixers first traded for him. You were like, he's Shake Milton, but like good. He does what like Shake Milton should do. So yes, Melton is just like an upgraded version. He's got the boosters, and like Harrell just like again is more valuable to a team. Like I don't think that margin's close either.
Yeah, and Melton definitely the better athlete of the two too. Like Shake is so smooth, composed, but Melton's a guy that will go up, dunk it on you, get rowdy, run quick. Like none of that. Shake's a very play at his own pace, and I agree with what you said that like he should be better than he is because he just leaves me with a lot to be desired, and I do think the Melton and Milton backcourt will be fun this year. I think they got to roll that out for a little. Each of them have kind of pretty freakish wingspans. I think Melton's is 6'9" and Milton's is 6'7", so cool to have. If those are our two guards, having that on the court could be kind of fun. By the way, D'Anthony Melton has averaged over 1.2 steals per game in all 4 seasons, coming off a career high where he was at 1.4. That's pretty impressive considering the amount of minutes he played. Like for his first 2 seasons, he played like 19 minutes a game. To guarantee at least a steal in that is pretty impressive. So I am excited for what that can bring.
Yeah, man, dude. Thinking about it now, like think about the defensive wingspan of like a lineup of Melton, Thibault, Montrezl Harrell. Like it has a crazy wingspan also. Like you can put 4 guys out there with like 7-foot wingspans. Like they're everywhere. And 2 of those guys being like very defensively oriented and good at stealing the ball and going for steals. Like playing in a zone with that type of team, like that's the type of thing that like having this good bench right now, like having guys that can do a lot of things, it makes everything so much better because you have so many options. So maybe Milton can find his way. Who knows?
Yeah, and in fairness to Doc Rivers, like as much as he catches criticism, he was limited in what he could do and rotationally, just options that he had off the bench. So just having like guys, granted, if he will get creative is to be determined, but he has the options to do it and has way more to play with. Yeah. And now moving back to the 2019-20 season to the next bench guy, I broke this one down into 2. The first guy I want to give a shout out to is Alec Burks. Only played 18 games in the regular season, so I didn't want to fully include him, but averaged 12.2 points, 3.1 rebounds, 2.1 assists, and shot 41.6% from 3. Way better than he gets credit for. Alec Burks played a valuable part on that Knicks team this past couple of years. He will now be playing for the Pistons this year. He was a part of the draft night trades.
Oh, wow.
Salary
I forgot about that.
Yeah, but I do love Alec Burks. Give him a shout out. And the other guy I brought up, since it was a full season thing, Furkan Korkmaz. We'll give him some love. 9.8 points, 2.1 rebounds, 1.1 assists, 42.2% from three on 4.9 attempts per game. This was when Furkan above a 40% shooter is a very playable player. But I still think Trez and Melton are significant upgrades over both these guys. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Alec Burks, man, I forget about that like year so much. The only thing like about him is like they took forever to get here. Like
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
like a week to like from the trade to get here, him and GR3. So yeah, definitely. I mean, Burks is fine. He's gonna shoot it every time he touches it. So like I'll take Melton then over that. And then Furkan's still here, man. So we got two of the reigning champs, I guess, for this with Korkmaz and Milton still here and Niang. So yeah, no, Furk, unfortunately, man, just not able to put it together much anymore. But hopefully he'll be back too.
Yeah, definitely. We'll move on to the 2018-19 season. I gave an honorable mention to Greg Monroe because just this should be acknowledged, but no, I wouldn't consider him the best. He only played 3 regular season games for the Sixers, by the way. He averaged 13.2 points per game in those, which I was blown away. But I guess he was purely a postseason signing, and we know how that went.
Yeah.
As far as the actual best bench player that the Sixers had this season, I'm giving the shout out to Landry Shamet, who averaged 8.3 points, 1.4 rebounds, 1.1 assists, 40.4% from three, 4.5 attempts per game. A guy who just bounces around contenders and always finds himself on winning teams, but has been traded a ridiculous amount of times. Do you think Montrez and D'Anthony Melton are better than Landry Shamet?
Yes. Shout out Landry. I love that guy. He was great here for a minute. I was really excited about him, but yeah, definitely. Melton is better than him. Harrell definitely better than Greg Monroe, so upgrade there.
Yeah,
And yeah, I think Montrezl Harrell's more important to a team, like we're talking about. Definitely is more helpful to a team winning a championship than either Landry or any of the other guys that were mentioned.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with that. And to slide back to the 2017-18 year, another guy I'm splitting into two. I got Marco Bellinelli, who averaged 13.6 points per game, 1.8 rebounds, 1.6 assists, 38.5% from three on 5.3 attempts per game. And another guy that the Sixers never were able to replace is Ersan Ilyasova. 10.8 points, 6.7 rebounds, 1.7 assists, 36% from three. I love the Ilyasova. I love both these guys. This might be the biggest argument I have for guys that might be better than this duo. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, dude, I was gonna say two of my favorite guys. What a fun year with that team and specifically these two guys were loved in this city for sure. Uh, Both of them, albeit very short periods of time, but yeah, I mean, I think in terms of like how I remember them, is probably better than like what they actually were. I feel like I remember them as being like great and never did anything wrong, but like Melton and Harrell are definitely better than those guys, in my opinion. I think we'll see that this year, but nothing against those two guys. I loved them, and that was a super fun team.
Yeah, I also completely remember them as awesome, but I also think it's a little telling. Like Ersan was literally out of the league and like putting up like videos on his Instagram of him working out, like begging for an NBA team to give him a chance. So as much as I remembered him as terrific, like I feel like that should say a little something. So,
Yeah.
but I also will give a shout out to TJ McConnell there. There was no real statistical season that, as we know by his play, that really replicates what he did, but a guy that I think should be acknowledged. And to move back one more to the 2016-17 season, I gave this one to Richaun Holmes. We're kind of moving into the dark days where I don't think the bench should be expected to compete, but I want to get all the way down to 2011, 2012. But Richaun Holmes in the 2016-17 season averaged 9.8 points, 5.5 rebounds, and a block a game. He also shot 35.1% from three on 1.5 attempts per game, which I didn't realize he was shooting threes like that.
Me either. I don't remember that at all.
Yeah.
Rashawn was great. I loved him here. Honestly, like one of my favorites through those years, and a guy that I thought at times might be on his way back here. We had talked about that a handful of times, and a guy I would have definitely welcomed. So, but still, again, the version of Montrezl Harrell we have right now is definitely better than the version of Richaun Holmes while he was here.
Yeah, definitely. A little bit similar. I think this is probably
Yeah.
similar to these guys, but Montrez can just do way more offensively. I think people are going to be surprised how much he can create. Like, he's legitimately a guy that can like ISO score at times, which we've never had from a guy remotely a big besides Joel Embiid. So
Yeah.
Excited about that. To move back to 2015-16, I don't think there'll be much conversation here, but I do love this guy, Hollis Thompson. 9.8 points, 3.5 rebounds, 1.3 assists, shot 38% from three. I can't believe he didn't land on the team, man. I thought Hollis was the man.
Yeah. Another one of those guys I feel like I remember more fondly than what the product was. But yeah, Hollis Thompson was good. I mean, he played with the Pacers for a bit, like for a very short period of time.
Yeah,
But just never really stuck anywhere. Yeah, Hollis definitely not better than Melton or Harrell.
No.
But again, another guy I feel like it's better to not like think about probably how good or bad he was and just remember him as being good and remember him as being like a fun player. It's easier that way.
I will say I don't think the gap between Landry Shamet and Hollis Thompson is that large. So like, maybe that's a little shade to Landry, but I always really liked Hollis Thompson. And now to throw it back to the 14-15 season, Jeremy Grant, I'm giving the shout. This is 20-year-old Jeremy Grant, who averaged 6.3 points, 3.0 rebounds, 1.2 assists, shot 31.4% from three. He's obviously become a much better player than he was at this point, but there were still some positive moments. I still think maybe he's a better player now at this stage.
Yeah.
Chance.
Yeah, I was gonna say definitely what Jeremy Grant turned into is better than these two guys. Yeah, man, it feels like forever ago that he was on this team, but yeah, definitely not at that time. Young Jeremy Grant, definitely not as quality as these two guys.
Yeah, definitely. And now we're getting into kind of the crux of my argument. These three here. First off, we got Tony Roten in 2013-14, who he was awesome. Averaged 13 points a game, 3.2 rebounds, 3.0 assists. Shot just 21.3% from three, but he had that lefty. He could get to the rim. I did love Tony Roten. Shout out to him, our first athlete we've had on the podcast. So that was cool too. But I think I'm confident in saying that the Anthony Melton and Montrezl Harrell are better basketball players.
Yeah, probably. But it's not as fun. Tony Roten was the man. We got nothing but love for Tony Roten on this pod for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. He was very nice to us too. So shout out to him.
Yes.
Moving on to 2012, 2013, one of my favorite players, but Swaggy P, Nick Young, averaged 10.6 points, 2.2 rebounds, 1.4 assists, shot 35.7% from three on 3.6 attempts per game. I love Nick Young, still love Nick Young, but as far as contributing to winning basketball, I don't think the conversation is that close.
No, I don't think we need to have it really.
Yeah,
honestly, shout out Swaggy P again, but no need for that.
Yeah, and now the last two names I got for you, and this is what I kind of think the Sixers are modeling a little bit and talking about. It's kind of funny how these two are linked. But first off, we got Thaddeus Young, who averaged 12.8 points, 5.2 rebounds, 1.2 assists, 1.0 steal. A guy that was awesome. Thad Young is still awesome. And then Lou Williams as well, 14.9 points, 3.5 assists, 2.4 rebounds, and shot 36.2% from three. How do you think Montrezl Harrell and D'Anthony Melton stack up against Thad Young and Lou Williams?
Yeah, it's like a different font of those two, right? Like different versions of each other. Which I like that. Like you said, it's a good thing to kind of build towards. It's tough. Those are two good duos right there. Lou Will, as a scorer, man, and having that off the bench. It's kind of like Harrell though, like having a guy that can go off for you. I think Lou Will at the time was better. As a whole is a better product, but it's tough to say. I think those are like they're kind of flip flopped in their strengths when you think about them. But that's a good way to compare them, I think.
Yeah, no, I think they're pretty close. And cool, Lou Williams and Montrez both played together with the Clippers too. Kind of, they were runners up for Sixth Man of the Year, which didn't make any sense.
Doesn't make sense
on the same team. But regardless, that Sixth Man of the Year season for Montrezl Harrell, he averaged 18.6 points, 7.1 rebounds, with 2.6 of them being offensive, 1.7 assists in just 27.8 minutes a game, which is pretty ridiculous production, averaging 18.6 points in 27.8 minutes. So I'm very excited about what that brings. To circle it back to these two, I still think this is an upgrade, and I think that's the closest thing the Sixers have had to competent, complete bench pieces in Thad Young and Lou Williams, and I think now we're kind of right back to it, which is an awesome thing.
Yeah, dude, I can't wait. I know that we started off not necessarily hesitant, but it's good. It's it's a good thing, but whatever. This Harrell signing is fantastic, and the fact that they have him for so cheap, and the ability, what he's going to bring to this team, through the season. That season was under Doc Rivers. I know we pointed out the flaws in how Montrezl Harrell was used defensively under Doc Rivers. We can also look at the other side and say, look at the production offensively, man. He was a beast. He was unique, big. He gives you versatility. He changes the way that you can play. And I think with guys like Tucker and Harris and Niang, like you give them some forward versatility there as well. So I cannot wait for what Harrell's going to bring to this team. And this bench is it's going to feel so refreshing not watching this team lose games because their bench can't compete at all. Now they're going to have guys 13 deep that, can compete at a playoff level. So it's a, completely night and day from what we've seen from this team.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things that, first off, kind of what we acknowledged on our last podcast is all the concerns about the Harrell signing have nothing to do with Montrezl Harrell. It's all about Doc Rivers will use him. That's the complete root of the concern. And the thing that's really grown on me and excited me about Montrezl Harrell, when you look back at all these Sixers backup bigs, the Dwight Howards, the Andre Drummonds, the DeAndre Jordan, the Greg Monroes, the Bobans, we all know them all, Amir Johnson. But all these guys all these guys were primarily in there to just be a worse version of Joel and mainly on the defensive side of the ball. None of these guys, the best offense we got from any of these players was a putback dunk or a lob and a dunk. That's all it was. Montrez is the first backup big, and I feel weird even calling him a big because I don't even really think he is. He just kind of sits in the paint and plays close to the basket. But he's a guy that can legitimately self-create. I think people are going to be shocked by his passing ability. He has some real moments where he can split one in there, kind of how Drummond did, but in a way I feel a little bit more confident about. And he really can just take a guy off a dribble, which we've never seen in a Sixers backup big.
No, I mean, a little bit more comfortable in the fact that he's not going to do the dumb things that Drummond did. Drummond had the ability, but he had blind confidence. He thought he could do something, he was going to try to do it, which is kind of, respectable in some way. But seriously, you look at this bench, and we're all excited about what this team can do and what the bench can do. And really, when you are looking at it, and before you add Harrell, you say, okay, guys that can shoot, spread the floor, play some defense, some unique talent, some interesting archetype of players. But you don't have a scorer. You didn't have a bench scorer, right? We even talked last year, not very much at length. We kind of all concluded Maxey deserved to be in the starting lineup and needed to be. But there was times last year where we considered moving Maxey to the bench to add the scoring. And really, you're getting that bench scorer in an unorthodox way, but in a really positive and good way in Montrezl Harrell. So I think in terms of what the other guys bring to the table, it's another unique talent and a guy that fills a gap. So I'm the more I think about it, every time I've considered it longer, I felt just happier about the way that it's played out.
Yeah, the Sixers were 27th in the NBA in bench points last year. That's not going to be an issue moving forward, and that's something that we haven't ever had. It's always been the surviving the Joel-less minutes. I think that there's things you can do with the second unit and lineups you can roll out that you don't even have to worry. You can be more concerned about extending the lead rather than just holding on, which is an awesome thing. So I agree. I think the Harrell signing has aged especially well. I think the more time that goes by, I feel good about it. And we're getting closer to some real basketball being played here.
Yeah, man. I can't wait. Yeah. Very soon.
Yeah, but I think that's all we got here from you guys today on the Pick Swap podcast. So appreciate all you guys for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe and drop a like if you haven't already. Give all the other pods on the channel a chance too. Got some Eagles content dropping tomorrow following the game, and appreciate you all.